Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to our new mixer. So, as far as just basic mixing works, if you just need to be here and you need to set up some audio real quick, it's almost as simple as the previous one. Simply turn on the power like before. Then if you look here, you'll notice that the light starts flashing. It means it's got power, but it's turned off. So you just press it, and it'll power on. It takes about 45 seconds for it to boot up, so this is where you would quick run grab a cup of coffee. I'll come back in a sec. Okay, we're back, and the machine is fully booted up. You can see that the LCD is displaying its normal menu. And as you can see, all the faders have actually slid up to the position that it was last at. So it's at this point that you can just start mixing like normal. Turn your dials as needed. One thing to note is that these purple faders are linked together. Only operate one of them at a time. If you try to operate both of them, it'll try to fight you, and I'm not entirely certain how good that is for the system. So that's what you need to know for that. Mutes are all the green buttons. You press them green to get sound. They'll be red or dark if there is no sound. Another really handy piece of technology built in is what's known as mute groups. Each of these buttons mutes a different section of the board. I've set it up so this one mutes all the wired mics, this one mutes all instruments, this one mutes all of the handheld mics, and if I press this you can actually see over here that these lights turn red, meaning that they're muted. And then finally we have an emergency button here, monitor mute. What this does is it will mute any audio coming out of the monitors. It doesn't affect any of these other channels, just the audio coming out of the monitors. Great for killing a feedback. So something else to note is we have what's called fader layers. When you press each one, it reconfigures the board so it'll control different sections of the setup. Chances are you'll want to be on layer A at all times. Fader C is useful for setting volumes on the monitor channels. At this point I'm only using monitor channels 1 and 2. Whereas the previous board had these rows and rows and rows of dials, all of that has been condensed down into virtual layers, if you will. So now this, where it's set on fader layer C, these channels here do the equivalent of the set of dials that was up here along this row. Another thing to note is each channel here has a row of dials along the top. In the default configuration, this will be lit. As you can see, it's labeled trim and gain. So you just want to make sure that that's set at all times. Any other ones, and there's other options to make those. There are other things that these dials can do, but the only one that you're likely to care about is trim and gain. So as you can see here, we have most of the dials set about halfway. So this is the equivalent of the very first row of dials on the old board. Here. If you want to set individual channels for the equivalent of the next set of rows, so you want to say, Rick wants some more of the piano. So we have our two monitor channels here, monitor 1 and monitor 2. Monitor 1 was the original, I think it was labeled 3 over here. Monitor 2 is the secondary one. They're actually numbered according to which channel they're plugged into in the pockets on the stage. So little pockets here. Each one of them has two speaker jacks. Top one is number 1, bottom one is number 2. So here we have audio coming out of the top one, jack 1, and this would be the jack for audio coming out of jack 2. As you can see, when I select them, the faders slide to indicate what values are being set there. So monitor 1, it's got a little more piano, a little less of the synth, and some voice channels here. Monitor 2 doesn't have any of these voice channels, just the synth and the piano. You press it and it starts glowing. You press it again and it stops glowing and it goes back to your main channels. Okay, so you've been playing around and somebody came up, twiddled a button that they shouldn't have. So how do you get out of that? Well, first thing you should do is you should make sure that none of these buttons along this top row are selected. Each one controls a different option, and like this one's sub. The other ones are not being used for anything, so they're obviously not labeled. But depending on which one is selected, you could get yourself into a situation where you're not entirely certain what you need to do. So the trick is just make sure they're all not illuminated. That should be it. Okay, now time to get on to some a little more advanced topics. So on the old board, we had a few strips of controls along here for the equalizer. Well, that's what these controls up here in red are about. Rather than having whole strips of controls that duplicate the same functionality just on a different channel. Oops. Pushing buttons on my phone here. We can now have a common set of controls, and you just choose a channel. So we want to control, say, the pastor's audio. So we select the channel, and then we can start twiddling these dials. So turn down the low pass, tweak the frequencies here a bit. And now you go to a different channel, and you notice that it switches around. So the surface here indicates the current state of the system. So this one here, I don't exactly want to leave it that way, so I'm going to clear it out real quick. Another item is soloing. So remember the old system, you'd press the little button and it would get the just the sound of that audio out of the headphones. Well, we got the same thing here. Big old button labeled solo. Click it on, and you can hear what's in the channel. Click multiple ones, you can hear the blend of all of them together. Same as what you would expect. Headphone volume is up here. It's just another rotary control. Just twiddle it until it meets your needs. Okay, now I've built a escape hatch, if you will, into the system. If all else fails and you don't know what the heck just happened, but there's no sound coming out, or just sounds all wonky and you can't fix it, we can solve that up here. So if we hit, what's going on? Yeah, a little technical difficulties there. I'm still getting used to this machine myself, so please bear with me. So if we look at the display, we'll see that there is options along the left here labeled Show. So if we choose that, you can choose Load. You can use the wheel here to select an item. There's only one item, so just choose it. You can see that I have multiple options here. Let's see if I can get into focus. So we have an item here labeled Default Show. If you choose that one, and press OK, it will give you this display, and if you choose yes, it will reset all of the controls to a known good position. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate here real quick. I've set it up so that I can demonstrate it without ruining any settings already. So I've twiddled the dials here, and we'll just assume that it's not working very well. So we'll just go hit show. I'm going to load, choose default show here, and then press OK. And I'll back up here so you can see what happens. When you press yes, give it a moment, it resets everything. Another thing to note is that each channel has a miniature dB meter on it. SIG gets lit if there's anything more than a hint of signal coming in. And each one of these illuminates up to 0 dB. Now, an important thing to note is that 0 dB on this mixer is not the same as 0 dB on the old mixer. If you noticed, on the old mixer 0 dB was about half scale. On this one, 0 dB is full scale. So rather than trying to twiddle the settings to get those levels to average out at 0 dB, here we'll want to average at probably no more than negative 12. I could explain that in more detail if you wish. Come see me at your leisure.